it is interesting to listen to the reaction to the notion that we are going to stop our dependence on Russian oil. I totally support that. The notion that I would buy gasoline in my hometown and put it in my car or truck and somehow subsidize what Vladimir Putin is doing in the rape of the Ukraine is just unacceptable. I believe there is not only a moral force, but a political force behind this. Morally, there's no way we're going to support Putin. Politically, we've got to come together with other nations and make this as painful as possible on him. And stopping the import of Russian oil is a move in that direction. It's interesting that that was a bipartisan position which I joined over the weekend. Many of us did. Democrats and Republicans all saying enough with the Russian oil. We'll find other ways to keep America's economy and cars and trucks moving without being dependent on Vladimir Putin or subsidizing his war effort. It was bipartisan. Strong statements. In fact, as many statements in support of this from the other side of the aisle as this side of the aisle. And then what happened? Well, Dana Milbank in this morning's Washington Post tells the story of what happened. After President Biden made his announcement Tuesday, he said accurately, since Putin began his military buildup on Ukrainian borders, just since then, that's 2 weeks, the price of gas at the pump in America went up 75 cents. And with this action, that America would stop buying the Russian oil, it's going to go up further. President Biden dubbed it, quote, Putin's price hike. Russia is responsible. So since this was a bipartisan idea of stopping the flow of Russian oil into the United States and subsidizing Putin's invasion of Ukraine, you would think there would be bipartisan applause. The exact opposite occurred. In the Dana Milbank article, which I'll ask to be part of the record, here's what was said by House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. These aren't Putin prices, they're President Biden's prices. Gas prices started rising the day President Biden took office, when he canceled the Keystone Pipeline and halted new drilling on federal lands. Turns out that these assertions by not just Kevin McCarthy, but other Republican leaders are just not accurate. Milbank goes to the task and assignment of actually backing up some of these facts with real history and real numbers. Here's what he says. Gas prices started rising on the day that Biden took office, he asks? Wrong. They've been on an upward trend since bottoming out in April 2020 at the start of the coronavirus pandemic. This is because of booming demand during the recovery. So this notion that these are Biden gas prices that just started going up magically after he was sworn in, not true. Then I love this one. On the Keystone XL Pipeline, how many times have you heard on the floor of the Senate, maybe even this morning, that canceling the Keystone Pipeline is the reason that gasoline prices have gone up? It turns out, according to Dana Milbank, that pipeline was only 10% completed when Biden canceled it. Its owners didn't even expect to open it until next year, 2023, at the earliest. Well, how about this one? You hear this over and over again from so many Republicans. Biden halted new drilling on federal lands, they say. According to Milbank, wrong. After a temporary halt in new leases, Biden has outpaced Trump in new drilling permits for public lands. That's been reported by the Washington Post. And as for Biden's shutdown of American energy, listen to this. U.S. production has increased under Biden from 9.7 million barrels a day to 11.6 million barrels. The number of oil rigs operating was 172 in July of 2020. Now 519 are in operation. U.S. production is forecast to set a record next year. Now, I don't doubt that stopping the Russian export of oil into the United States is going to have a negative impact on gasoline prices. It stands to reason. But there is an adjustment being made. The president spoke to it last night at a meeting we attended, where he's working on other sources for America to make this hardship as little as possible. I want to ask unanimous consent that this Millbank column be placed in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, finally, an omnibus spending bill. For months, there's been negotiations underway. The process has been drawn out. As a member of the Appropriations Committee, there was a lot of frustration. But soon we're going to vote on an omnibus spending package, and we're going to do much more than keep the lights on in our government. In many ways, this spending package is a testament to the progress we've made during the past year of the Democratic majority. We have historic funding to reduce the cost of living for working families. We get it. American families are having a tough time making ends meet and are living paycheck to paycheck. We take action in this omnibus spending bill to start to address that challenge. And we create good jobs here in America. Isn't it about time that we focus on making things in America, putting people to work with the good jobs that supply them? And we need to ensure families and children can access critical supplies like nutritious food and clean water that they need to survive. This bill also provides more than $13 billion to the Ukrainians fighting tooth and nail to defend their freedom. The Democratic Senate caucus was fortunate last night to have over an hour and a half with the president, where he spoke candidly and informally about the challenge we face in Ukraine. We have sent millions, maybe billions of dollars in assistance to those who are resisting Vladimir Putin's barbaric attack on that nation, and we know that it's the right thing to do. There are displays of courage by the Ukrainians, the likes of which we haven't seen in modern times. President Zelensky, particularly, has impressed not only the United States but the world with his singular courage. These funds that we're putting in this bill will help Ukrainians on the front line to continue to hold back Vladimir Putin, and on the ground and in the air through cyberspace, as well as helping our NATO allies in the region. NATO has never been stronger. 30 different countries standing together, shoulder to shoulder, to stop Vladimir Putin's invasion. And the omnibus spending package also makes crucial investments in America at a time when we need it. Funding research into technology and innovation. Innovation is an American phenomenon. Other countries do it, but I think we do it better. And whether we're curing a disease, creating a new industry, or combating the climate crisis, America needs to continue to lead the world in innovation. This spending bill does that. In a moment of great peril and uncertainty in the world, we're coming together to defend our families, our security, our economy, and our future. But we need to move fast. We need to send this package to President Biden's desk quickly. For the past 2 weeks, Russian mortars and missiles have been raining down on innocent people and children throughout Ukraine. More than 400 individuals have been killed, with some estimates in the thousands of deaths, believing that the current numbers are really an undercount. And let me say one word while we're on the subject of Vladimir Putin and war crimes. What more evidence do you need than the bombing of a maternity hospital and the killing of mothers and infants? This man, Putin, in his attack on the Ukrainian people, is not following any standards or rules of decent conduct in any way whatsoever. I think it's obvious. That Russian airstrike that devastated the hospital complex in Mariupol is an indication we will never forget. A video released shortly after the bombing showed a pregnant woman being carried away on a stretcher, surrounded by pulverized cars and flames and blackened trees covering debris. It was a scene from a horror movie, a horror created by Vladimir Putin. Ukraine needs humanitarian, military, and economic aid today. That is exactly what this omnibus bill will provide. Billions of dollars in military equipment and intelligence support, and even more billions in emergency supplies, food aid, health care, migration, and refugee assistance. This is how America stands by our fellow defenders of democracy at their darkest hour, and Ukraine needs our help. Here at home, this spending package includes a number of provisions that will strengthen America and the 330 million Americans who live here. We're bringing vital investments back to our home states. I support the return of congressionally directed funding because senators and representatives know their states and know their districts better than any federal agency personnel in Washington. I'm pleased to report that my colleague, Senator Tammy Duckworth, and I worked to include $210 million in funding for Illinois projects in this bill. And I'll be ready to stand up and defend every single one of them, piece by piece, project by project, as a good investment in the future of my state and our nation. This funding is going to help localities in Illinois launch important infrastructure, access to health care, environmental conservation, strengthening community violence prevention initiatives, supporting nonprofits doing important work throughout our state, and much more. We also do something that I've worked on personally for the last several months and particularly proud of. We're going to reauthorize the Violence Against Women's Act, known as VAWA. For months, I've worked on this proposal with some amazing people in the United States Senate. On my side of the aisle, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who really was one of the founders of this effort. On the Republican side of the aisle, two women senators who've just been amazing, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Joni Ernst of Iowa. We wouldn't have passed this bill, included it in this appropriation measure, were it not for their good effort. I thank them very much. They have helped provide a lifeline to survivors of sexual and domestic violence. With this year's spending package, Congress will finally reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. Additionally, the omnibus includes funding for a long-standing priority of mine, research. These investments in research are going to help keep America on the cutting edge of innovation, life-saving medical treatment, therapies, and so much more. For example, this bill provides the National Institutes of Health with a significant funding increase, this time $2.25 billion increase. That's more than 5%. 5% I've kind of established, I hope, with some of my colleagues, as the holy grail of increases each year in research, particularly at the NIH. And with the good help of Republican Senator, retiring Senator, unfortunately, Roy Blunt of Missouri, we've managed to keep our promise. Lamar Alexander, now retired from the Senate, was one of the leaders on this issue, and Patty Murray is always there from the state of Washington. Well, we're going to keep our word again this year. Basic medical research, which the United States leads the world in, is going to be enhanced with this improvement of more than 5% increase in the budget of the National Institutes of Health. I'm particularly pleased this omnibus bill includes a dedicated $25 million for the implementation of the Act for ALS bill, which became law late last year. I want to thank Senator Coons for his leadership on that issue. This funding will ensure that NIH can quickly launch new initiatives to expand access to treatments for those suffering from ALS. Sadly, I'm disappointed to say this package does not include COVID relief. We're at a turning point in this pandemic. New cases of COVID are at their lowest rates in more than 7 months, praise the Lord. And parents and families are just anxious can be to get the kids back in school and life back to normal. These are promising developments, from vaccines to better treatments. We cannot predict that this pandemic is over for good, nor that it won't resurface in terms of new variants. We need to prepare for what the coronavirus might have in store for us. We need to make sure that we have the therapeutics and strengthen our capacity to detect new variants before they become pandemic. Given the dire urgency in the situation in Ukraine, I understand we simply don't have time to go back to the bargaining table. But many of us still believe that a toolkit to deal with the future infections in COVID or the next pandemic is absolutely essential. I can only hope the Senate agrees with that on a bipartisan basis. 2 years into this pandemic, we know this virus is anything but predictable. It operates like free-form jazz. Just when we think we found our rhythm, the tempo gets turned upside down with a new variant. This current lull in cases is a perfect moment to tune up our instruments, keep our fingers sharp, and prepare for what's next. Let me close by saying that aside from the omission of additional COVID relief, there's much to celebrate in the spending package. It's an example of what Congress can achieve when it works together. In the face of Russia's horrible invasion of Ukraine, an invasion has already created 2 million Ukrainian refugees. We are standing together in defense of democracy. Russia's invasion is a tragic illustration of one man's mania and of a conflict that will define the 21st century if we don't stop it in its tracks. Right now, Putin is waging yesterday's war with yesterday's goal of reestablishing some Soviet Union. He's sending ill-equipped teenagers in Russian army uniforms into Ukraine to terrorize innocent families and bomb children in hospitals, all in some delusional effort that he is going to create the new Russian empire, with his being installed as the czar of that enterprise. He's not willing to face the challenges of the new world, so he's trying to revive the old world. Autocrats like Putin live in fear of the future. Democracies like America welcome it, because we know that the future represents an opportunity to build a better world for everyone. That's precisely why President Zelensky and every Ukrainian is fighting to protect their country. They're protecting as well the freedom to shape their own future, not to have their future dictated by a man like Vladimir Putin. With the spending package before the Senate, we can begin building our own future as well, a future made in America. Mr. President, I yield the floor.